candid conversations, unfiltered opinions, and humor with Abeg Vex Podcast.
Hello. Welcome to our episode today. We have a very interesting guest. I share some passion with her, so I'll ask questions so I can learn. So if you're in the authorship niche, you're looking to start out, you're in it, and you like to learn a few things, this is the episode for you. If you're into public speaking and you like to start out in public speaking, this is a great episode for you. So today we have the pleasure of having Stephanie Thoma with us. Stephanie is an author and also a public speaking coach. So lots to discuss, lots to talk about, lots of questions, lots to learn too. So pull up. Hi, Stephanie. Welcome.
Hello. Yeah, thanks for having me on here. And I can share a little bit about my books, or the world is our oyster. We can talk about anything.
Anything. And that is going to be the direction we go today. We'll talk about anything. So let's start with your books. Let's start with your journey in being an author. What sparked that interest in you to write?
I started writing, journaling mostly when I was really young, just getting clear on what my emotions were and creating storylines of different things that happened, reviewing what, let's say, my day was like. And I think also poetry, songwriting, it's been a creative outlet and one for reflection and understanding life and giving meaning to it through writing it down, and also writing down goals. There are countless studies that point to writing down goals leading to a greater likelihood of actually achieving them. Yeah, writing has been a constant in my life for as long as I can remember. And I had this thought around being an author, but it wasn't urgent. I felt like, this could one day. And I think many people can relate to, I do want to be an author, but one day. But if you know, if you want to be an author, you're not questioning it. You know that you want to be an author. So there came a time when it was 2019, there was a lull in some projects and, typically freelancer business owner mode. Then, you do your lead generation activities. But I decided actually, no. Let's embrace this space that I have around 6 weeks between things. And instead, I'm going to write my first book. And instead of putting too much emphasis on this needs to be the book, I just decided, okay, this is something that I feel like I have a lot to share on right now. So I ended up writing a book called Confident Introvert, a practical guide to connecting with others at networking events and beyond. And it was based on my experience hosting 1,000 networking events and what I learned through different body language tactics and how to be socially and emotionally resilient in the face of social rejection. And yeah, it really poured out of me. I know that it was a part of my life purpose to write that book. And since then I've written a few others, but I published one other so far. And the process is it's a paradox of containing creative flow, letting everything out on the page and then deciding, okay, and now let's put it in a structure. But I think it's really valuable to give yourself as a writer that permission to not necessarily even look at a blank page, but know that you've probably already written a part of your book somewhere. There could be, if it's a more personal memoir type book, there's probably a journal entry that will actually be included in the book. If it's more self-help or businessy, like my first book was, then maybe you've already jotted a blog post down that could be something that sparks something larger within a book. So I know that for me, that helped break it down and feel more approachable when instead of thinking, oh my gosh, I'm looking at a blank page, I need to write an entire book. It's taking it a chapter at a time, but not even a chapter, a section within a chapter at a time. And then you allow things to expand.
Thank you for that. And I think people overthink it in a sense where they feel like if I need to write a book, I need to write the whole book in a day or, a week in a month.
There's so many Instagram posts that are like, write your book in a day. And it's like, I guess with ChatGPT you can, but then guess what? You didn't write the book.
Right.
If you're using ChatGPT, you didn't write it, and people can tell that you used it. So
I'm glad you're speaking to that because, I think it's the money-making aspect of things that's why that niche exists, I should say. But for somebody who genuinely wants to tell a story, it cannot be done in a day. So thank you for saying that, taking bite-sized pieces. So, Stephanie, what was the catalyst you talked about journaling. You talked about kind of like reflecting on your day, writing down goals and things of that nature. What was the catalyst that propelled you to really pursuing your first book and writing that book? Because you're writing a book for introverts in a very not introvert setting, which is like networking, right? It can be very overwhelming very quickly. So, it's my thought that you could actually relate to that to an extent. That's why you actually wrote that book, because there was no guide for people that consider themselves introverts. So what was the catalyst that pushed into actually writing that book?
For me, it started with hosting a lot of events and then naturally becoming a speaker, because when you're the host of the event, sometimes you become the MC because you know what's going on. You know the schedule. So you're simply the messenger. Hey, everyone, welcome. Bathrooms are over here. If you need a beverage is over here. Is our next speaker, that sort of thing. So I was really comfortable with moderating panels, MCing, all of that, with a background in journalism as well, written and spoken. And then a friend gave me an opportunity and said, hey, I'd like to invite you to give a talk at my meetup. And I asked, oh, okay, what talk do you want me to give? And she said, I want you to talk about anything you're an expert on. And I didn't know what that was. So it was a process. I ended up meeting up with a woman in a female founder community that I was in. And she sort of specialized in helping people find their topics for talks, which was ideal. Mm-hmm. And we settled on the topic of networking for introverts. So my workshop was called Networking for Introverts. And the content pretty much just poured out of me. It was a combination of mindset, body language, and everything that you see in the book. Well, actually, the book is even expanded. It's more information than the signature talk was. Mm. But yeah, I gave the talk, and it was one of those situations where when you just know, okay, I'm on the right path, because there were 60 people that RSVP'd to this brand new meetup. And we thought, oh, that's more than I thought. And then at this WeWork in downtown San Francisco, people stopped what they were doing and they gathered to watch my talk. And then I didn't have a call to action. I was a pretty green keynote speaker. But people still asked, oh, hey, how can I work with you? Yeah. Wow. And being entrepreneurial, it can be a journey of things, of learnings and things working and everything in between. So to have that type of response was telling me something. So I continued giving the talk. It was a combination of me pitching the talk, but other people finding out about it and inviting me in. And that year I gave it about 100 times in person, and not just in the city I was living in, San Francisco, but around the US, even abroad. And then, there was that pocket of time towards the end of the year where I realized, oh, I have all this content, and even beyond what's in the workshop, people have been asking me questions. Yeah. So I can include answers to those questions. I wanted to create a resource that was something that could help people if they couldn't attend one of my talks. And that's what I think is so powerful about books in general. We have access to the minds of people that we may never meet, that we most likely will never meet, especially if you're an avid reader. You're going to read a lot of books. You're not going to meet all those people. Some of them are alive, some of them are not. But so it is a legacy piece to have a book. But beyond that, it's being able to extend a sort of impact. And in terms of networking for introverts, people think that it's an oxymoron when we're actually all social beings. We all are wired for connection, but sometimes we go about it in slightly different ways. So the book is simply a toolkit for people who feel like networking isn't for them. And I go through a lot of reframes talking about, well, networking is literally making friends with other ambitious people as an adult. It doesn't need to be this weird, necessary evil. It's, Yeah. And at the root of connecting with others is having a comfortability with the self.
Yeah.
So there's a fair amount of mindset stuff in there as well. And I think it's perfect for the person who's on a journey towards even greater self-acceptance and who maybe has had a lot of relationships, platonically, not platonic, family, whatever it may be, that were challenging. Because, when we go out into the world and meet new people, we have opportunities to start again and to do better and to even help others. So that's really what the book is about.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So given that you have experience, I'm going to talk about storytelling. So you've pitched, had speaking engagements. You're also an author. What is the relationship, when we're talking about the storytelling relationship, or whether there's similarity or differences between the storytelling you do when you're writing a book, the storytelling you do when you're pitching, and the storytelling you're doing when you're on stage with a speaking engagement? What are the key differences or similarities with those three, I would say?
When it comes to storytelling on a stage and even in a written format, it's ideal to just go for the meat of the story first, draw people in. An example would be of what not to do would be if you start a story with, it was a rainy day in San Francisco and I pulled up in front of this house and it was Thanksgiving and I walked through the door. And it's like, okay, cool. You're setting it up. And some stories are like that. Okay. But particularly, maybe that's actually more appropriate for a novel or written where you have that time and you're like, what's going on? Oh, I guess it doesn't really matter yet. Just take me along for the ride. When in public speaking, you will lose people. So what you want to do is say, and then I saw smoke. And I could tell that it was coming from the kitchen. We had to leave, like whatever it is. Just being able to start with that moment. And then you learn later the context of, it was Thanksgiving and this is what happened. And now you kind of want to lead with whatever the climactic moment is in a story, or at least very close to it. If you are illustrating a point with a story, then it doesn't always need to be purely sensationalized. It's a balancing act when it comes to speaking inspirationally, or even if you're speaking and wanting people to get tangible takeaways, storytelling is really paramount to helping things stick. I like to include a combination of stories, but also, when they're available, statistics or anything to support and sort of ground the stories to let people know why they should listen.
Okay. So how about pitching? Because when you're pitching a business, if you're a founder, you're pitching a business idea, whether it's a software, platform, whatever it is, and you are actively saying whatever it is that you need to say to get the buy-in. Not only the attention, but the buy-in of your
pitching.
Yes. How is that different?
Yeah. So when it comes to pitching, you want to be sure to be concise and to also, you really can't lose people. It's if you have a keynote presentation that's 20 to 60 minutes, then there are some points that it will be more like, whoa, or enthralling than others. But if you have, let's say, 1 minute, 30 seconds, 3 minutes to make a pitch, what I like to do is, it's similar actually to how I begin most presentations. I like to ask people a question and ask for a show of hands, because we can always have people speak in the audience. It sort of depends on what the crowd situation is like. But to get people invested because they know that what they're about to listen to is relevant. So, for example, I'm actually going to share an example of a time when this didn't go so well, but then how I handled it. So before I presented networking for introverts a few years ago, I was at Yelp headquarters and I asked, who here identifies as an introvert? And out of 300 people, about 3 people raised their hands. And so I was like, oh, this isn't what I imagined for a networking for introverts workshop, right? So then I asked, okay, how many people here identify as extroverted? And then, almost everyone raises their hands. I'm like, how about ambiverts here? And then and then I defined the term for those that didn't know, that it's a kind of a cross between extrovert and introvert. And then I said, well, So you're in for a treat because you're going to better understand your introverted counterparts so much better after this presentation. And we're going to have networking tactics and skills that you can use if you're working on your confidence, even if you are extroverted. So there's always a way to make it relevant. So what I would encourage speakers to avoid is, let's say if you ask that question and then you're like, oh shoot, it's not my target demographic, be prepared that could happen. Because ideally, in that case, I think the event organizer was an introvert and wanted the presentation and didn't really survey their people. So, I mean, ideally that's done in advance. It is not always done in advance. So yeah, another example, I mean, it can be good to sort of, when you're doing a pitch, let's say that you're pitching a product, and you could either lead with a pain point or you could lead with something that people love. Yeah. So let's say that there's a snack for a kid's school and it's free of allergens, the primary ones, peanuts and whatever else is out there that people don't want at schools. Then let's say that you're pitching and you can say, who here has kids? And then maybe people, raise their hand or they don't, or who here has a peanut allergy? And, you can read the room and gauge. What I like to do is say, who here has this or is this or knows someone? Okay. And then another question I like to ask is, so let's say when it comes to a limiting belief, I might say, hey, who here has ever believed XYZ? So some people may feel more comfortable raising their hands and owning, yeah, I have felt that at some point, but it may be too intimidating to put their hand up and vulnerable to say, oh yeah, I'm experiencing that right now, that imposter syndrome. But when you say, oh, hypothetically, have you ever experienced this? Then people say yes. And getting a yes verbally or non-verbally, it's kind of like sales, getting people to say yes, then they can be more invested in the rest of your presentation. I do like to get people involved, but of course you have information to give, especially in a pitch. So you want to keep that minimal to the beginning, and then maybe one or two more times, really depending on how much time you have, and stick with sharing useful statistics that support your point. And I would also include a short story if possible within the pitch, just because that really helps tie people in. Most decisions that people make are emotionally based. Yeah. They're not all based on logic. Even the people that are hyperlogical, they are still making some decisions behind the scenes based on pure emotion. And so it's beneficial to a speaker to be able to know that and use that in a way that's mutually beneficial.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I think just the thought of pitching in front of people is very intimidating, and especially pitching to people that you are actively working on, kind of like getting their buy-in. And the reason I brought this up is that I'm in a cohort of founders, and we had a pitching event the other day, and one of our cohort members uses the raise your hand theory, and actually one of the investors was actually pissed off. It's like, it's not a fiscal yes. So it's something that has worked so well, and we've seen this pitch, we've heard this pitch time and time again, and we've seen mentors who applaud him, we've seen people who applaud him in the space that he needs to be. And then you have that one person that is pissed off that this is used. So I know.
I mean, what can you do? You cannot please everyone. That's kind of funny.
Right.
Why were they upset?
Because I guess that they felt elementary. So the one thing that we've done is that active, interactive engagement, with the room. And, it's like always a waste of time to tell people to raise their hands, just, whatever. So, it's just read the room. Like the analogy or the experience that you shared, where only 3 people raised their hands when you asked.
It was good information.
You just have to read the room and be able to pivot on your feet. That was great. That was such a great example. Thank you for that. So let's go back to wallflowers and introverts. So many of us, I'm an ambivert. Okay. I have a time where I come alive, and I have other times that I'm like, okay, I just want to be a wallflower, leave me alone. I just can't function in the space. So what are the things like an ambivert or even an extrovert, everybody, okay, at this point? Because sometimes we have those moments where we feel, I don't want to use the word small, but we just want to feel invisible for a few minutes, right? Maybe we'll come back out to the light, or maybe not. What are those cues, that a person should recognize once they're in a space where maybe they feel overwhelmed?
If someone enters a space and they feel overwhelmed, I think that there's an opportunity to actually do things in advance. So I'm going to share some things that you can do in advance of an event, and then I'll go into things you can do during the event when it's like, oh, shoot, you're there and you're already in it. So visualizing how you want the event to go. I actually have meditations on my website. If you go to stephaniethoma.com/meditation, there are networking meditations that can help put you in that space of seeing yourself in the room, how you want to interact with people, how you want it to go. Having that intentionality can actually make a difference with how you show up in the room because it's already been rehearsed. And another one, I like to recommend having a solitude sandwich. So this is great for anyone that hits the wall and they're doing well at the event and then they need to go because they ran out of battery power, right? Ran out of energy. But it can also be great if you're prone to anxiety. So what you want to do is have intentional solitude before and after the event. It could be a speaking engagement. It could be a networking event, whatever it is that you know you want to be present for. You'll want to take some time before and after. And also taking the focus off of yourself. So let's say that you're at the event and maybe your mind goes blank. I hear this from speakers. Maybe they're on stage and all of a sudden they forget everything. Yeah. Or maybe they're in the room and they're like, oh my gosh, where do I go? And this sort of frozen fight or flight response. So what you can do is decide to be more self-aware than self-conscious. Mm-hmm. So when we're self-conscious, we're maybe focusing so much on our own experience that it actually keeps us from connecting with others or presenting ourselves in the best light. So when we're self-aware, we know, okay, this is where my physical body is in this space. I am near the check-in or, whatever it is. And it's necessary to be self-aware and to know, okay, great, I have my shirt on the right way, all of that good stuff. But when we're in a space where there's a possibility of overwhelm, being able to direct the focus to other people in the room and to get curious about them and even focus on, okay, how can you help someone else in the room feel comfortable, right? So this puts you in a more power position than someone who's entering a room and scared to be there.
Scared is it's a deep word. Scared is heavy because at some time, depending on the room, you can enter a room and okay, I'm completely out of my league here. What's going on? How important is support? Because how do I phrase this? Having somebody who's like, get up there, you can do it, whether before, during, or right before a presentation does help. For me, it does help. Having that fallback person, whether it's a text message, a call, or somebody there has helped in the past. Is that something that you would recommend for somebody to do? Yes, you do have the meditation that you do offer. And yes, for everybody listening to us, everything about Stephanie will be in the show notes, her website, her socials. So if you really want to work with her, which we would recommend, she's great at what she does, click in, follow her, see what you can benefit from her. And she'll talk about her products and services and offers later on. But, is that something that you recommend for somebody to have kind of like that added support if they are aware of maybe the overwhelm they may experience in a certain space?
It's important for someone to be open to helping themselves. However, there is a nuance. There are two reasons to hire a coach. One is that maybe you haven't really tried, but you are either clear on your vision or you think that a coach will help you clarify your vision and then help you to make some of the choices that will move the needle forward faster than if you didn't hire the coach. So hiring a coach who has accomplished things that you wish to accomplish can certainly speed up your timeline. However, if someone is, let's say, wishy-washy on their vision or their level of commitment, then hiring a coach will not help necessarily. There needs to be full commitment because if you're not fully committed and you hire someone, then you may run the risk of victimizing yourself because you're expecting a savior of sorts to okay, now this person is going to fix my business. But when it comes down to it, the only person that can really save you is you, but you can hire people to help. right? So this is when people ask for advice, but then they don't take it. Or this is when they get feedback and they disregard it or they don't take action on it. So, there's this phrase that is thrown around, like, are you coachable? And I don't really believe in that. I don't think that someone is either coachable or not, because I don't think that everyone deserves to be your coach. I don't think you need to submit to just anyone who is a coach. Be discerning, identify someone that you really respect, and then you can decide that you want to be coached by them. So I wanted to clarify that, because I think that there are some coaches out there that if someone doesn't want to listen to them, then they think, oh, well, that person's not coachable. It's like, actually, maybe you're not a good fit. So it's important to be discerning, and it's kind of a green flag if I encourage shopping around, but not necessarily wasting people's time and having discovery calls with 20 people without the intention of purchasing. That's really not going to get you anywhere. And that kind of dilutes, your energy, and it can be, just a little bit of a boundary violation for the people who you're having calls with. So do your research, follow people on social media. If they're on YouTube, watch a lot of their videos. You can get a feel for people based on their website. Actually, a mentor I'm working with now, a friend recommended her, which was really nice. And then I ended up looking at her Instagram content, and I resonated so much that I invested in her highest package without even talking to her first. Because I saw enough of her videos. I saw a lot of them. And I realized, imagined that, okay, I have a good feeling of what this is like. So it's trusting that. It's sometimes some people have a gut instinct, and other times, if you've done enough research and you're feeling like it's a yes, here's what some people do though. They think, oh, but I don't know about from a budget perspective. So I think I should find someone that maybe does the same thing as this person that I really want to work with, that's cheaper. But then hold on, if you really feel resonance with this one person, do what you need to do to make it work. I do think that from a soul perspective, there are people that are almost destined to meet and collaborate and work together. And if you feel a strong pull, no matter how irrational it is, if you have this sense that it could actually make a difference in your life, listen to that.
So there's a lot of truth to what you said, because I've had to learn that lesson the not so nice way. I don't want to call it a hard way, but it was. But it was a lesson I learned, and I'm glad I was able to learn that lesson. So in choosing a coach, is not enough that very minimal connect to you. It got to be somebody that, you respect. First of all, that's the first thing in my book. Respect. If I can respect you and I respect your practice, then we have a solid foundation. So do your research, just like Stephanie said. Do your research. Just because a coach was good for one person doesn't mean that coach is necessarily good for you. So even if it's like a referral, yes, referrals are great. Referrals are beautiful, wonderful, but still do your own research. Look into this person's practice, reviews, have a conversation. Actually, my coach, who I'm actually happy to be starting with, actually was a guest on my podcast, right? And when we talked later, I found out that a lot of people in my space were actually coached by her. And she's like, oh, wow, I didn't even know you knew. And the names just started dropping. I'm like, okay. So I felt it when we met. So it is very important that you have commonality, I would say, or starting with respect, and then commonality with whoever you're looking to be coached by. That is very important. There are a million different coaches out there. Not everybody can coach everybody, and that's fine. And that should be okay. So going back to coachability, is a problematic word. However, okay, let me say this. It's problematic because not everybody uses it in a sense that truly represents what is happening, right? There's some people that are not coachable, coming from a teacher's perspective. They're just students that I know cannot learn from me, right? Is that my fault? No. Is that their fault? No. They can't learn from me, and that's okay, right? So I think using that as a punitive statement to say a student is not teachable, that is not accurate, because they can learn from somebody else, but not from me. However,
Well, it's a growth versus a fixed mindset.
Exactly. But, if somebody's not willing to take directives or directions from anybody, it doesn't matter if it's free or paid. I don't think that is a coachable person. If somebody is, yeah, but, I don't think that's a coachable person.
Yeah. And, another thing people have to know, either trust or know that it's going to work for them. Because if there's a bunch of doubt when the decision's made, not to be confused with, there could be like, oh gosh, this is a stretch for me. Or maybe it's the biggest investment I've ever made in myself or whatever it is. And that can be normal. But if it comes down to like, oh, I hope this works, but I really don't think it will, then you need to actually work on yourself before you make any sort of investment, or focus on mindset and maybe getting someone to help you with mindset before you actually make the investment, because the power of belief is something that should not be underestimated.
Absolutely. I agree with mindset 120%, because that mindset will cripple you. Even if you want within you to make a change, if your mindset is not directed at making this change no matter what, it's not going to work. Some people is just stuck in the way. It's not stuck, just within comfort zones. We are comfortable human beings. So if you don't get your mindset to where it needs to be, it doesn't matter the effort. A lot of coaches will not succeed with you. So that was brilliant. Thank you so much for saying that. So, since you brought up mindset, let's talk on mindset a little bit. How much of cultural nuances, I know you and I talked about this yesterday briefly, how much of a cultural nuances can really, really, really affect somebody's mindset and the ability to think outside of what they're used to?
Yesterday, we were talking about hot versus cold climate cultures. So I learned about this concept in a book called Foreign to Familiar. And an example of a cold climate culture would be a place like New York, where it does physically get colder. And then let's say a hot climate culture example would be Texas, where it's physically hotter, but it's beyond that. It goes into the cultural nuances in New Yorkers, obviously being more direct communicators. Mm-hmm. And maybe not putting a lot of fluff. Some people can think, oh, that's like too direct or terse or abrasive or whatever. And then we know about the Southern drawl, and maybe instead of saying something that is actually true, saying bless your heart, and, reading between the lines, like, what does it really mean?
Right.
And yeah, I mean, these are just a couple of examples of cultural standpoints. And I don't necessarily think that everyone from New York is direct or everyone from Texas is indirect, because I think that people can be born into a culture that actually doesn't fit them. Where just like you can be born to a family where you're like, how did this happen? So, it's one of those situations where, I met someone from Amsterdam, and that is a more direct cold climate culture, who traveled to Texas and felt right at home with the niceties and the slower pace. Mm-hmm. And so I would encourage anyone listening to this, if you feel like you don't really fit in exactly where you are, maybe look into the hot versus cold climate culture scenario. And this can also come into play while you travel. I know many of us, if we do travel, then we kind of know, okay, it's going to be a little uncomfortable, but to be really mindful, if you're in the market to move somewhere, look into if it's a cold or hot climate culture before you make the move, because it's actually harder to acclimate to when it's polar opposites in terms of the direct versus indirect. Another component is being more task-oriented versus people-oriented. So in a people-oriented culture, that's hot climate culture. That's where you have a business meeting, and even though there's literally a person at the business meeting, no, like whoever's right in front of you matters most. And at the post office, you'll talk for 15 minutes, even though there's someone in line behind you, because it's more about the connection. Mm-hmm. And it would be rude to do what a cold climate culture might do, which is be in line and not make any small talk, and then put your postage on the letter and say, thank you, have a good day, and leave. Right?
You don't have to say that. Here, okay. Out.
Right. So, I mean, I just really want to caution people that are considering moving, look into whichever culture it is. You can look up the book Foreign to Familiar online. And I also have a YouTube video on it actually that breaks it down a little further.
Beautiful. I like that cold versus hot climate culture thing. I'm going to look into it. And yeah, New York is very much like, have a day you deserve kind of a place, where there's good.
So we're not saying have a good day. Have the day you deserve.
Have a day you deserve. What happens. So that is the spirit of the place. So
that's so funny.
Whatever comes, that's your business. It's none of our business. So with your coaching and speaking and having to interact with people, talking about the cold versus the hot climate, do you see similarities and marked differences in how, let's talk about mindset and how mindset may work with, being apt to change, I should say, with mindset to reinvent oneself for whatever vision or goal that they have at hand?
So there are trends in the people that I work with, not necessarily where they're from, but they tend to live in cold climate cultures because cold climate cultures, not always, but oftentimes are correlated with ambition and success. So, think about San Francisco, New York versus Florida and Texas. Not to say you can't be successful. However, it's a little more of a leisure lifestyle versus being in the grittiness but being like, no, this is worth it because of the potential that I can make of myself. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the people that I've worked with, I was actually just contemplating this today, a fair amount, I'd say maybe even about a quarter of the clients that I've served have had some form of neurodivergence subtly, right? So maybe being very high functioning autistic. And what that lends itself to, from what I've observed and actually appreciated, is this sense of directness and this sense of transparency and not really always reading into, or maybe not even always understanding, like, but wait, why would someone say something they don't mean? Right. So yeah, even someone listening to this, if you suspect or you have been diagnosed with high functioning autism, for example, you could thrive better in a cold climate culture. But again, I'm not wanting to make blanket statements because there's so many nuances, but sometimes, I studied sociology, and sociology is essentially putting people into categories because it's easier to do that sometimes. And actually, oftentimes, statistically, it's often true what we're able to generalize about certain groups. It can be dangerous at times though. So because I know there are always outliers, there are always people that are like, but hold on, I don't fit that mold. Yeah. So that's why, these are simply things to consider.
That makes sense, because when you describe a telltale cold climate, and New York City being one of those, is a very much live and let's live kind of a city. You don't bother me, I don't bother you, we're cool. You live in your weirdness. I have enough of my own weirdness, so let's just exist. So as opposed to a culture where it's people oriented, okay, why is this person weird? Why are they doing that? Let's kind of get into it a little bit and see where we can help. So it makes sense. It makes complete sense. So let's talk about your office and your services, because I want people to know how to find you and what you can offer. Okay. So what are your offers when it comes to like coaching, mentoring, and things of that nature?
Yeah. So to start with, I'd love to invite your audience to join my email newsletter. It's free and it's weekly. And I oftentimes have a video of the week. It's personal development focused or professional development focused. So you would go to stephaniethoma.com/newsletter for that. And then when it comes to my service offerings, I have a variety of online courses that people can look into at any time. But to work with me one-on-one, there are a few options. So I have a VIP day, and typically people book that if you'd like to outline your signature talk, or something that you could even turn into a book. That outline really is multifunctional, but most people that I speak with benefit from a longer term engagement. So I do have packages that are 6 months long where we'll be able to not just get your signature talk outlined, but also work on the confidence piece that you need to really have honed in to when you do get those opportunities to really make the impression on stage count. So then you're invited back, or that you have other opportunities that are a result of that opportunity that you got. And I have a huge community building focus, and public speaking, community building, and networking. They all kind of go really well together. So we'll be able to identify, okay, what's an area for growth so that you can rise to the next level. And in this tech age, I love in-person stuff, but also getting savvy with how to, for example, optimize your LinkedIn. So another offering, let's say if your listener is thinking, okay, VIP day and the longer term engagement, not sure about that, something that's super quick. I have a LinkedIn audit offer where if you have a certain goal in mind, it could have to do with public speaking, but I've actually done this for professionals in a variety of industries. Yeah. If you would like your LinkedIn to be a sort of inbound generating machine where it's so optimized that people reach out to you. So for example, my profile is optimized to the point where I have inbound speaking opportunities coming to me because they're able to find my profile. And then it's just a matter of, oh, what's your rate? Because we've already looked you up and we already know that you're what we want. So I help other people get to that stage. And that's a quicker process. So yeah, if that's of interest, then you could email hi@stephaniethoma.com with LinkedIn audit in the subjects. And then I'll let you know the next steps. That'll be a quick and easy thing to do.
Beautiful. Thank you. And you mentioned LinkedIn. Are you on any other social media platform?
Oh, yeah. So I'm on YouTube. I do a weekly video and I've been doing it for 4 years. Oh my gosh. I mean, I've been doing it for longer than 4 years, but every week for 4 years. Yes. So, and it's going to continue. So yeah, if you want to see me on YouTube, head over to youtube.com/@Stephanie M. Thoma. And then my handle is Stephanie M. Thoma across platforms. So you'll also find me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, and everywhere else.
Beautiful. Great. So we'll make all of that available in the show notes so you can easily find it, click into it. And once this episode is released, we'll also have a LinkedIn newsletter for you. So if you want to browse before you listen, great. You're welcome to do so. So this was great conversation, Stephanie. Something I usually ask of my guests before we conclude the show is to leave a few golden nuggets or one golden nugget for our listeners. What is the one thing that you can say to an aspiring speaker, author, or a founder who finds themselves or who's currently in the area of pitching their business?
If you're feeling self-conscious and you are experiencing anxiety or fear or just this uncertainty around your next steps and if you should be visible, if you should move forward, maybe it's not that you care too much. It's simply that you're caring too much about what the wrong people think.
Wow. Wow. Yes. And that is very true. Is that saying the people that mind don't matter and people that matter don't mind. So they're paying attention to the wrong people.
Yeah, care about how you feel. That's a big part of my platform.
I love it. Absolutely. I love it. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Very grateful you made time for us to have this conversation. And thank you everybody for listening. Please reach out, go check her out on all socials, listen to her weekly, episode on YouTube, and also her newsletter is free. Subscribe to it. I mean, you might learn a thing or two. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Stephanie. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Abeg Vex Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. It really helps us out. We'd love to hear your thoughts and continue the discussion. So join us on social media or drop us a message. Until next time, keep exploring, stay curious, and keep pushing the boundaries of your world.